Introduction. Good morning, everyone. And it's great to have you part of the issues class this morning. On behalf of the mission committee, we came up with the idea that usually we're assigned a couple of classes, the first in early January. And so we decided that it was important to bring up some topics that we've all been working on, which is diversity and inclusiveness and racism and all of the things that are so in front of us right now. And I happen to have this wonderful friend, Joe Robinson, who is our speaker today. I convinced him that he should join us today, and he is one awesome person. I hope that you've read his resume. It's really impressive. He's just recently retired from the Central Pennsylvania Sickle Cell. And Joe, yeah, whatever. And he is now just doing so much community service, which he has done all of his life. And he and I worked together on the Harrisburg Public Schools Foundation, which is how I got to know Joe. So one of the things that he's proudest of is that he serves as president of the Martin Luther King Leadership Development Institute. And I had to read that, so I had it right. But anyway, that's where his honorarium will be going. And so he has a lot of things to share with us about that. And also he's been an ordained deacon in his church since, I believe, 1986. Is that what you wrote?
That's correct. That's correct.
And it's the Greater Zion Missionary Baptist Church. And so I heard him first speak. He was the keynote speaker at Christian Churches United fundraising banquets a couple of years ago, and he's awesome. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Jeff.
Wow. Well, thank you, Marion. What a wonderful introduction. My goodness. We can just end it right here and just going home. But I tell you, it is such a delight to be here. When Marion mentioned this to me, and then Jack and Susan followed up, I was truly humbled to be asked to comment on this subject. It's a subject that has been in the mainstream for a while now, particularly since the George Floyd incident in particular. It really brought it to the forefront, the need to talk about this issue of diversity and inclusion. I wanted to talk about it this morning on the context of how Dairy Presbyterian, I guess I was asked to talk about how Dairy Presbyterian could embrace this concept and become more inclusive, and more ways that you can build a sustainable community. And so I'm going to just offer you my thoughts. My thoughts are not exhaustive, nor are they the final word, but you're getting one person's opinion who's been looking at this for some time. And so I'd just like to share that with you. I like to preface, I guess if we could pull up the PowerPoint, I like to preface and undergird, I'm talking about diversity and inclusiveness that builds community. And if we go to the next slide, I'd like to undergird it with a scriptural reference written to the church one more time, to the church at Ephesus, out of the book of Revelations. Thank you, right there. You all may be familiar with this passage, but it says, I know your deeds, your hard work, and your perseverance. I know that you cannot tolerate wicked people, that you have tested those who claim to be apostles but are not, and have found them false. You have persevered and have endured hardships for my name and have not grown weary. And that is a scriptural reference I wanted to use, because when I think about Dairy Presbyterian and I think about your rich history, I mean, for almost 300 years of service to your community, you talk about not having grown weary. And I know the challenges over the years. I can imagine, having been in church most of my life, what it's like sustaining anything for that length of time. And yet you continue to serve our community. And I'll talk about that a little bit later on as well in this presentation. And but I thought this passage of scripture, I know Paul wrote to those 7 churches, but I think this particular aspect of that letter to the church at Ephesus speaks to Dairy Presbyterian. And I wanted to undergird my remarks with that as a backdrop, understanding that, and so we can move on from there. Now, I do intend for this to be interactive, and so certainly You don't necessarily have to wait until the end. If something comes up and you like to talk about it, we can. So feel free to jump in. I was told that you are a lively group. No. The word was inquisitive. You were in an inquisitive group. So by all means, feel free to exercise that. Uh, I just wanted to contextualize the issue here. We're talking about diversity, inclusion, church growth, etc. I want to contextualize the issue with some things that you already know, obviously, but I just did a little research on my own, and again, I know I'm reiterating some things that you all are probably already aware of. But listen, the membership of the Presbyterian Churches USA is first of all, it's 90% white, 4.2% are African Americans. The Asians make up 2.9% here in the United States, and the Hispanics represent 1.47%. So clearly we see, first and foremost, as you yourselves, and the reason I want to contextualize this, because I know you're looking at how can we have more of an impact in the inner city, in the urban community, et cetera. But and recognizing first and foremost, let's say where we are. We know we're 90% white, maybe 4% black nationwide, and let's just start with that as a mutual understanding. The next slide, please. 2/3 of the congregations nationwide have 100 members or less, and then the other aspect of that is 2/3 of the 1.3 million Presbyterians belong to churches of 300 or more. And so I'm not sure where you all fall, but those are the two statistics that I thought was pretty interesting. In terms of active ministers in the Presbyterian Church, other than obviously the majority of them being white, 6.9% are Asian, 3.6 are black, and 2.4 are Hispanic. Next slide, please. You probably know this name better than I do, but Reverend Herbert J. Nelson, your clerk of the General Assembly, he made the observation when he looked at the statistics for 2019 and saw that they had the church had the falling off had kind of slacked off, I should say. He was encouraged by that, and he says that we are no longer evangelizing on the motto, if you build it, they will come. He says, we are learning that spiritual development and leadership training focused on discipleship is paramount to developing healthy congregations. He goes on to say, our current future growth is dependent on evangelizing immigrant communities. And why? Because our mission field is coming to the United States, seeking both freedom and opportunity. Again, you all have probably well-versed and have heard these comments from him before, but I'm trying to contextualize our conversation here today. And number 3, we must bear, he said, the hard questions as to whether we will accept these communities into full membership rather than create categories that marginalize their participation. And let me back up to that second bullet about our mission field that's coming to the United States. I am a published author by Judson Press, and Judson Press, you may know Judson Press has been around since 1824, and so I thought that would resonate with you, having yourselves been around a long time. But Judson Press published my book on leadership entitled 7 Leadership Imperatives from a Wild Man. And one of those imperatives I call imperative number 4 says that we as leaders must be discerning. And that means we need to be mindful and watchful of the changing conditions around us, always willing to adapt and move. And so your president, Dr. Herbert Nelson, points out, I think very correctly, he said, our mission field, this is the notion of being discerning and recognizing that the environment we lived in previously may not be the environment we're in today, but then what are we going to do about it? Because it's not enough to see changes occurring, but then you must take action. And so he says, our future growth is dependent on evangelizing immigrant communities who are coming to the United States. seeking both freedom and opportunity. I often say a lot of times when our demographics around our churches or our companies change and the makeup of us begins to change, we start putting up for sale signs instead of saying, what opportunity is this presenting for us? And that's the way we need to look at it if we're going to be a discerning 21st century congregation, church, etc. Enterprise. We've got to begin to look at it from that perspective. We see things are changing, and things will change. Bill Alexander, being an engineer, he probably has heard of Dr. W. Edwards Deming, and maybe some of you have as well. But Deming was a quality guru, and that was my training when I worked at the Department of Transportation. That was my background. And one of the things Dr. Deming, he used to always advise executive leadership about how to improve their companies and to be able to compete internationally. And one of the things he would say to them when he'd tell them how they've got to do things differently, sometimes it was bitter medicine and they didn't want to accept it. And he would say to them, listen, he said, and I actually had this sign, I kept it in my office. He said, you don't have to, he said, you don't have to change if you don't want to. He said, and then he would tell them, survival isn't mandatory. You don't have to change. Survival isn't mandatory. And so if we want to survive in any entity, whether it's church or a corporate organization, we've got to always be looking at our changing landscape and seeing it as opportunity and saying, what can we do? And now that I see it, what are we going to do about it? And so I think Dr. Nelson was very prescient in his thinking, and he's right. The mission field is coming to us. And so, as he said, we must bear the hard question then as to whether we will accept these communities into full membership rather than create categories that marginalize their participation. Next one, please. He goes up, and I might say he concluded his remarks, by the way, by saying, having looked at the changing landscape, he says, we are not dying, Presbyterian Churches USA. He says, we are reforming. We are not dying, we are reforming. And so I think those were some very insightful remarks from Dr. Nelson. Your church, my goodness gracious, when I look at the work that Derek Presbyterian does in our community, I mean, I looked at your website and your mission page, and you all are more familiar than I am with these 8 categories of service that you provide, feeding the hungry. And I look down at the list of all the organizations. I mean, I don't think there's an organization in Harrisburg you all don't touch. My goodness. I said, wow. I mean, from under the feeding the hungry, and not only the blood bank, but the racetrack ministry. And I know from working with someone who had worked with racetrack ministry, that's such an important ministry. Those folks who are working in those stables behind the scenes, I mean, they're subject to all kinds of, a lot of high alcoholism and everything. And the fact that you all invest time in that community is commendable. So when I look at all of that work that you do with feeding the hungry, educating the children, whether it's the Joshua Group or with Marion and I, with the Harrisburg Public Schools Foundation or the Boys and Girls Club. I mean, your access to healthcare, the fact that you support the Community Checkup Center in Hall Manor in Harrisburg. I mean, that is just phenomenal. The YWCA, the Stop the Violence program. Then I look at your refugee program and your community outreach with the Lend a Hand and the elder care with Christian Churches United and your own care and share program and so many ministries. I mean, you got your shawl ministry, you got your animals and the grieving ministry, and I just think it's just phenomenal. And so when I said I wanted to undergird this this presentation today with that Revelations passage, I mean that. When I think of a church, when he would say, as he said to the church at Ephesus, I know your works, I see your works, you know, and that is you all, no doubt about it. You guys are indeed persevering and enduring the hardships. and doing some great work. And so I think you're to be commended for that. My goodness gracious. So let's move on to the next slide. And I'm not going to be with you long. I just wanted to share some things, and then we can have some dialogue. But diversity versus inclusion. You've heard it said before, diversity means being invited to the party. And that's this notion of let's open up the doors and include everybody in our undertaking. But then inclusion is now that we've invited you here, how do we make you feel welcome and a part of the organization? So someone said it's one thing to be invited to the party, it's another thing to be asked to dance or even asked to choose the music. And so those are the things we talk about, those terms. I just thought we need to kind of, as a framework, put those definitions out there just so we can be thinking of, okay, it's not enough just to say we had somebody here, but what did we do to make them really feel like a part of what we're doing and not just an observer, in what we're doing here. Next slide, please. And so the issue today was, how can we build community? How can we move from just acts of service, and Lord knows you have many, but how can we move beyond that and actually build community? And so this is what I talk about in this call to action. Again, become a champion, number one, with your voices in addition to your benevolence. Become a champion. In other words, how can dairy be a voice from the outside in support of minority causes? And maybe rather than perhaps focusing on increasing membership of the minority community, how can you become a voice for those causes? And certainly your service into those areas is unprecedented and undeniable. But in terms of being a champion, an advocate, a voice who speaks out, who goes on record, how can dairy be more visible in that way? And that's not for everyone, and every congregation isn't necessarily given to public affirmations or public pronouncements to that extent. But I'm suggesting, in terms of if you're trying to build more community, besides the acts of service that you do, consider becoming vocal in support of those causes. And because I believe that when you become known as someone who stands up for the issues, I believe then that your record of service and the fact that you stand up will drive the membership that you are seeking. And the other question we have to ask, even before we consider this, is what is the overall objective? Is it to gain new members from the urban community? Again, we're looking at the national statistics, so it's not like you're are an anomaly here in central Pennsylvania. The national statistics say that the Presbyterian congregation is predominantly white. So is the intent to change that makeup here in central Pennsylvania? Is that realistic? Or are you looking for better ways to build more alliances with those in your community? So you have to kind of think about, what is our objective here? So that's something that I just want to posit, that you need to be clear on that, of what is our objective here as we look to build greater community. And then if we can move to the next slide. One of the things you can always do if you want to know how others can be more involved, particularly those that you help, and you reach out and help so many in the community, ask them what are their barriers to greater involvement. Ask them. Stephen Covey's habit number 5 says, seek first to understand, then to be understood. And so ask the people, go into the conversations with your ears, recognizing that we have 2 ears and 1 mouth. Go there to those individuals and ask them. Doesn't have to be a mystery. Ask the people that you're serving, and you're serving somebody. Ask them, what are the barriers to greater involvement with us? Don't make any assumptions, but just go in and seek to learn. And number 4, invite those. Go back one more, please. Invite those who have been helped to come to the church. And when they get there, create an inclusive environment. That might mean special music. I don't know. You know, across Christendom, there are some common hymns that we sing across Christendom, such as Amazing Grace. But there are other hymns in African American community that are sung even more often than perhaps Amazing Grace. And so it behooves you to say, well, if we're going to invite people in, let's try to have some special music that particular day to make them feel welcome and a part of our organization. So that's just one minor top of the head suggestion. But my point is, you, after having talked to those individuals and find out what their barriers are, and then when you are able to invite them in, take that information and use it to create an environment that is inclusive and feels welcoming to those you've invited. So I just wanted to put that out there. Again, I think you all, again, being so active in the community, have a fairly good handle on these things. But if nothing else, hopefully I'm reaffirming the conclusions you've already arrived at. The next bullet, please. Request an invitation to an event held by those helped. There's a lot of organizations that you help, and they do a lot of different things, and Lord knows they couldn't do it without you, and they appreciate everything you've done. But maybe consider going into their arena, if you will, taking the initiative to support physically some of the things that they're doing over and beyond the service that you as a church provide to them. But as individual members, let's go and demonstrate to them that we value your world also. We value what goes on in your world. And so if you're holding an event or providing, we want to be there so you can see that we go beyond just pitching in or go beyond an act of service, but that we are genuinely interested in what you are about, and we want to learn more about you. I talk about Judson Press. I tell you, was my publisher. Judson Press was started in 1824, and ultimately it was named. It was given the name later on in honor of Adoniram Judson. Adoniram Judson, you may know, served in Burma, there in next India, and he served for 40 years there. He and his wife. In fact, he not only did they go there, he and his wife, and learn the Burmese language, but he developed a Burmese dictionary. He translated the entire Bible in Burmese, and they spent the first 3 years there learning the language and culture of the Burmese. Before they had their first convert, they spent 3 years determined to learn the language and culture of the Burmese before they sought to convert them. And so that's the point when I say, go to events that others are holding and try and understand and learn firsthand what's going on in some of the different communities that you're trying to reach. It will reap some dividends. It's a trite saying, and everybody's heard it, but it says, no one cares. What does it say? No one cares how much you know until they know how much you care. And so the same thing applies here. Now, the last thing I would say in terms of call to action is to read other literature. Read other literature. And I've got 3 books here that I'm just offering up that were written. These are also some Judson Press books. So I'm advertising. There's hundreds of books out there on these subjects. I'm suggesting the ones from Judson Press. My father used to tell me it's a poor frog that don't praise his own pond. So I'm praising Judson Press here today. But these 3 books, the first one, Tony Campola's book. Tony Campola wrote this book, Can Mainland Denominations Make a Comeback? That was the title of his book. And the book deals with the notion of, he challenges the assumption that denominations are on the road to extinction. He challenges that. He says, he argues that if those churches can restructure themselves in relation to the major social changes of recent years and the years ahead, and if the church can recover a balance between evangelism and social action, then they just might be able to make a comeback. And that's his premise. And he talks about that. Tony Campola is a professor emeritus of sociology at Eastern University, author over 35 books. You've probably seen him. He's been guest on Nightline, Crossfire, Charlie Rose Show, Larry King Live, and CNN News. So he's quite a well-known figure. And so his thought is, and having pastored for so many years, he wrote this book, Can Mainline Denominations Make a Comeback? The other book, Coming Together in the 21st Century, the Bible's Message in the Age of Diversity. Curtis DeYoung, in this book, he provides an in-depth study of multiculturalism and diversity in Scripture. With nearly 50% of new material, this book features contributions from ethnically and culturally diverse men and women who offer their unique perspective. Now, Curtis DeYoung has his Master of Divinity, his Doctorate of Education, and is a professor of Reconciliation Studies at Bethel University in St. Paul, Minnesota. And so, again, he comes with some training and experience. And so he makes the case that we must come together in the 21st century, and he uses the Bible to illustrate how that occurs. And then the last book, it's written by a female. The other two books were written by a white gentleman. This is a Black female, Jenny Kilgore Cockcroft. Jenny wrote a book titled From Classism to Community, A Challenge for the Church. And she was writing primarily to the African-American church, but it applies to everyone. She examines the biblical truths that all persons are made in the image of God, and persons who are transformed through faith in Jesus Christ become members of equal standing in the Christian church. With these two truths as a foundation, she proclaims that Christians should accept one another as equal inheritors of God's grace and should relate to one another as peers, regardless of any differences in socioeconomic backgrounds. And so she writes about From Classism to Community. Now, Dr. Kilgore has her Doctor of Ministry degree, her Master of Divinity, as an ordained American Baptist Churches minister. And so she is in the Los Angeles area, Los Angeles, California, and her book offers spiritual and practical tips to people with low income. So these are three books. In terms, again, why am I giving you these books as a call to action? Because as I told you about the Judsons, before we're going to truly impact our changing environment, we've got to understand it. And that may require us to read differently, may require us to view differently. And so my suggestion to you, if you, as clearly you have an interest in building community and going beyond acts of services, I'm suggesting that these are some ways, these are some of the first steps that it will take to really achieve your objective. And that's to immerse yourself in some new understanding. And that means reading some different materials, listening to some different people, placing yourselves in some different environments to try and understand. Again, seek first to understand, then to be understood. That was and I think the next slide, I think is my last, I think that was it. I think, yep, then Q&A. Now, so I figured we'd take the next 15 minutes, if there are any, have some dialogue and questions, and then we'd wrap up and get you all out on time. So those are my thoughts. I hope it was worth you getting up just to hear them, but let's have some dialogue now.
A couple of things that came to mind to me were a very important thing that you said is to understand before you talk, yeah. to listening. That is the person you're talking to. If they think you understand the problem, then you can have a much better dialogue. That was very important. One reason dairy keeps its high numbers, in my opinion, We are, last I knew, the largest church in our presbytery. We have 900 some members. I believe that's still true. Is that we have that many different things that we do, that we bring in members because of the outreach we have in all these different areas that you outlined very well. So I think we just naturally keep a good membership because we're diverse in the number of programs we contribute to. My question to everybody, because I don't know this answer, geographically, does anybody know what percentage of minorities we have geographically through our church? I don't know if that might be a problem or not, because we would like to attract, more minorities, but I didn't know if geography is part of the problem.
Yeah. And not only geography, and maybe by geography, we're saying the same thing, Jack, transportation related issues when you think about geography. Getting to your facility,
Right. We're right. That's what I'm getting at, basically. I don't know that answer. I just wonder if that's something we have to overcome.
Well, and I'll shut up a minute because I know someone that wants to answer, but I'll just say this too. That gets back to the other point of and asking those that you are seeking to more involvement with. Ask them what are the barriers, what are the impediments, and find out. And it might very well bear out what you're saying, Jack. But it starts with asking the people that you're interested in.
Well, and I appreciate your comments about not necessarily boosting the minority numbers within our church, but looking for other ways to partner and participate with those minorities. So I really appreciated those comments, because I do think we do have a long tradition through our missions, and we can always do a better job, though, in terms of really developing a strong partnership with our community organizations that we work with on the ground. I know I work with Stop the Violence very closely, and we give them money, but the head of Stop the Violence, Mim Harvey, who we work with, is always really good about inviting us to every event, even the smallest of events. And so a lot of your comments rang true with me, and I'm starting to understand all of the value of just attending those little events, however little they are, because the impacts can be really big.
Excellent, Kristen. Thank you for that.
I think that one of the things we did in the past, which we're always supposed to be looking to the future, but in the past, Bill even made the comment, didn't we used to do something with a couple of churches in Harrisburg? And yes, indeed, we did a long time ago. So maybe it's time for us to reach out again and see if we can move forward and do something together with another church in the city. And Joe, maybe you can help us with that.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
Yeah. And it would be really fun to come together, because we can offer things in Hershey that, of course, people in the inner city don't have. And we could have a picnic. We could do a bunch of different kinds of things.
Well, definitely be shared learning, because not only would the people in Harrisburg learn some things, but you'd learn some things as well by interacting. And so it'd be some learning for everybody. And you're right. Those are always opportunities. Again, as I said at the outset, what is the objective? Is it to increase membership, or is it to increase and build better community? Because it may not require the membership going up, but it may just require more interaction, as you're alluding to, Marion, with other congregations and doing shared ministry that way. Maybe by pooling resources to do shared ministry, we build that community, even if it doesn't change the makeup per se of our congregations, but that the work gets done more cooperatively and more effectively. So those are things to consider as well. Excellent point.
And Marion, just to build on that.
Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, just one more comment. As a teen, our youth group went to downtown Philadelphia and attended the service of a Black Baptist church, and it was one of the greatest, coolest events to see how other communities worship. And so I think it'd be really good to start with the youth. We're all older, and so it'd be really great to energize some of our younger people, so that they're helping move our church forward from the younger generations up.
Well said. Well said.
Hi there.
Hello, Andrew Barna, and who
Liz.
is this?
I'm
Is
Liz.
you say Liz?
Yes.
Oh, hey, Liz and Andrew, good to see you both this morning.
I'm the assistant head of school of Logos Academy in Midtown Harrisburg.
Okay.
And our main school population is the underserved of Harrisburg.
Okay.
And just speaking to other comments made, speaking to my own community, we cannot underestimate the difficulty of transportation. We don't even have students from Allison Hill, which seems relatively close, but transportation is such a significant issue. We've lost children whose car has died the first day of school. They're like, well, we're out, because they're not able to get a new car. It's not a little bump. Like for us, it is life-changing. That means they can't get to their job. Whatever steps that would be easy for us are just significant for them. So I totally agree with Kristen that the one thing we can offer is mobility. Derry is actually sponsoring one of my classrooms, and they've helped rebuild the classroom, and they help with supplies, and they actually gave gifts to one of my students for Christmas. But what the thing we can do is we can move out to them. And we really need more people in the community. So finding a way to help solve transportation issues, but going to them, showing up at their events, showing up at school events, showing up in the city is so significant.
To give transportation.
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Anything else, Andrew?
No, I just my wife says all the smart things.
Well, that makes you an even smarter man for recognizing it.
Just, can I add one thing? I don't think Stephen is on this call, but I know that he was trying to form an alliance with Reverend Miller's church in Harrisburg. I can't now think of the name of the church.
That was, I think that was that
Zion A&M.
It's the Methodist.
Yeah, but it's I want to say not Camp Curtin. It's
Zion A&M.
I think right. It's the denomination, but the name of the church itself is I think they're up on Camp Street.
Yes, that's the one.
Yes, it's Camp Street. And you know what? It's so funny. I've known every Wesley Union AME Zion. That's the name of the church. Yeah, Wesley Union. So I didn't mean to take away your point, but that is the name of the church, Wesley Union AME.
Church, but I know Reverend Miller had come to speak at our church, and Stephen was supposed to go speak there, but then everything happened with the coronavirus. And I know Reverend Miller had done an issues class, and there's to be a second one. He couldn't do the second one, but I think that was an attempt. I think our youth had gone down to that church, if I might be mistaken about that. But that's one community that we were trying to work with. But as the last 9 months, I don't think much was able to be done. But
Right.
It was an effort.
Yeah, it was an effort. That's great.
And I think he intends to continue to pursue that when we can.
Well, we have a lot of examples of so many of our members of our church who are always in there with our different mission projects, and in our community checkup center, we always go to the spaghetti dinner, which is a lot of fun and supports them financially. And we do things like that, but we don't do enough. And, you know, we have access to our church van. And so we do have some ability to bring people to our church if we have a plan to do it. So hopefully once we get through this COVID crisis, we can start doing some of these more social things again, which to begin with that, just to share some of our stories.
That's excellent.
Maybe I'll just.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Mira.
Yeah.
Love it.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking. I really appreciated your comments too about like becoming a champion with our voices, like not just with our benevolence. And I think, so my husband and I, he's Asian American, so we have a biracial family and 2 little kids. And when we're new members, probably some of the newest members to the church.
Hey.
When we were looking for a church, we were really trying to look for a church with diversity, which is very hard to find in the Hershey area. But something that did attract us to Derry was that from the pulpit, there were some messages being talked about racism, and that the church was beginning to use its voice, even in a small book study, to try to address these issues and talk about. And I think, it sounds like Derry has done, I'm still learning about all that Derry is doing in the community, but using that voice too, with the number of members that we have and that Derry is recognized. I think to your point, like that is an area where we can take more of that prophetic voice and try to use that to show that we're a community that is trying to learn, and also to do justice and go beyond just the giving piece to society. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, no, thank you for your affirmation, and you're right on target. And welcome to Derry.
Yeah, Mira, we need you on the mission committee.
That's right. We need to talk more about it. Yes.
Right. And to your point, I did listen also to just a couple snippets of from your pastor. His first name Stephen, right? Dr. Stephen, yeah. And you're right. Impressed me as being very young, energetic, and prophetic, and really interested in the community. And so I can understand why what he would have been coming from the pulpit would have resonated with you. But that just validates my point. It's important that when people hear, when people hear that kind of thing coming from the church, whether it's through the pastor, through your newsletters, through a statement on your website, when people see that says volumes about what this organization is about. Again, going beyond benevolent acts of service to actually building community. And that's what I believe is your objective. And so you have to decide, well, what's the best way to do that? Is it just changing membership makeup and numbers? Or is it about really having sustained shared ministry within our community, being a presence, being a recognized voice, not just a recognized benevolent organization, but a recognized voice, a recognized champion in our community? Because if we're ever going to deal with the issue of racism, it can't just be a problem solved by Black people, obviously. So we need strong mainline churches like Derry to be vocal, and so that people understand this isn't some minor opinion here. This is a mainline church, and this is how we see it, and we stand up and we speak out where we see it, and because we are about building community. Dr. King called it the beloved community. He was all about what he called building that beloved community.